The standard unit economics for Meineke location, 1 million top line, about 20% store level EBITDA margins. And these three were maybe performing a little bit below that mark.
Jack and Jake left their jobs in private equity 2 years ago to acquire 3 Meineke franchises. The duo moved temporarily from New York to North Carolina to learn the business inside and out. They'd go on to win Rookie Franchisee of the Year, and then the following year, they won Franchisee of the Year for the entire Meineke system. Today, they have 25 units and no signs of slowing down. Before buying the franchise, can you give us an idea of what you were doing professionally and ultimately what pushed you over the edge to jump into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, and Jake, you should jump in and give your background too. Patrick, we both had similar careers, did a couple years of investment banking out of college, and then I was at KKR on the private equity team. Always had a little bit more of an entrepreneurial itch that I ultimately wanted to scratch. Really wanted to buy my own business and scale it, work on some interesting problems with people I liked. Jake and I are childhood buddies, had similar dreams, similar visions, and we ultimately took the plunge about 3 years ago at this point. Jake, I don't know what else you would add, but that's what I was up to before we got into Meineke.
Yeah, so similar professional background to Jack. Did a couple years of investment banking in Chicago before transitioning to Prospect Hill Growth Partners, based outside of Boston. Had always wanted to do something more entrepreneurial. I had envisioned creating something, realized that I actually wasn't that creative and had a different risk tolerance and wasn't comfortable starting something from the ground up. And my private equity experience kind of exposed me to the ETA world. Ultimately, I had always invested time and effort into things that were going to yield a direct benefit to me, whether it was training for sports growing up or studying in high school to get into the best college. So the concept of grinding for someone else's benefit, whether that was in banking or my private equity role, wasn't very inspiring. So I wanted to bet on myself, put myself in a position to control my professional trajectory. And so that kind of evolved into partnering up with Jack and hosting bi-weekly brainstorming sessions on different spaces to invest in. And that's kind of how we got started, and started with a couple hours a week, and I think we were fond of franchising. I had had exposure to that through Prospect Hill via Orange Theory, Crunch, Dogtopia, and Sweat House, which was a franchise or investment. So that's kind of where we got started, yeah.
So I definitely want to key in on why you guys chose Meineke and, was whether it was a brand play or more of a sector play. But before even getting to that, I mean, this is a subjective question, but like, how ready do you guys truly feel as far as like knowing what you were getting into? Because coming from a private equity background, I mean, just totally different world of your day to day, right? You're probably wearing collared shirts, working in the office, running Excel models all day, or just very different than owning a few Meinekes, which is where this journey does start. Now that you guys have the benefit of hindsight, do you feel like you had any like naivete or romanticism about what, a day in the life of a multi-unit franchise owner would be? Or do you think you kind of knew what you were getting yourself into?
I think there's a difference between what you think you know and what you actually know, having lived it for a couple of years. Yeah. I think Jake and I were willing to do whatever it takes. We moved into a small house with our COO, Joe. And at that point, we owned 3 shops. We were literally going to every store a couple times a day. They were really close together. So I think we had the awareness of we're going to do whatever it takes because this has to be successful because we don't have a plan B. But even today, a couple years into it, we're 25 locations. We've got a couple hundred employees. We've got a really strong corporate team. We still get pulled into directions that I don't anticipate. Sometimes it's something larger and more strategic. Sometimes it's paying a bill. And I think being willing to recognize you don't know everything, being willing to realize that it's a small business, it's less small than it was 2 years ago, but there's a lot of things that go into operating a business. I don't think we had any idea what that actually meant coming out of really traditional private equity. I certainly didn't, and I don't think my friends and peers do either.
Yeah. I would say also, like, I've had friends ask me, how did you know when you were ready? And the answer wasn't really ready. There's no, like, perfect moment where the light bulb clicks and you're like, I know everything that I need to know in order to make this leap of faith. I think given my background, I was comfortable with the M&A side of things, I personally didn't have much operating exposure with the portfolio companies that I was involved with. I had no experience in managing people. So for me, that piece of the equation was intimidating, but I felt like, my experience in sports and just overall hunger, as Jack said, to make this work, I was confident that we would be able to figure out that piece of it. So for me, it was the operational side of things, and I knew that Jack and I could execute on the roll-up and deal-making side of things.
Okay, so getting to that first deal, before we even get to the Meineke auto sector play, like, was there any hesitation from either of you guys on being partners? Could make the argument right now you're splitting the pie 50-50. Yeah, was there any just like, should we just do this on our own? Or you guys, like, what was the thought for doing this together?
Yeah, Jake and I were really good buddies and have become even closer. There are still challenges. Any good partnership, I think, gets tested. But I think two things that have been our North Star and helped us navigate potential issues. We wanted this so badly, right? So badly that we were willing to leave our jobs, have nothing to talk about for a period of time. We had a very similar vision of what we wanted this to be. And we're also really cognizant of disagreements happen. It's never personal. It's always about work. We've got very different decision-making styles. Jake's way calmer than I are. He's got a much lower resting heart rate. My highs are really high, my lows are pretty low. But because we both follow most of the time an independent decision-making process, when we get to the same answer, if we get to the same answer, we feel really good about it. And that's exactly the approach we take with our broader corporate team today. We don't rule by fiat. We don't make pronouncements. We really try to solve things by consensus, both when it's the two of us as well as when we're in a broader group. There's challenges. There are in any relationship. We spend a ton of time together, but that's how I think we've navigated it. But Jake, you should jump in too.
Yeah, I think about it in two components, right? There's the emotional component and then the operational component. And emotionally, departing a stable career path in private equity, you have a stable salary for, an unknown, going off on your own, acquiring 3 locations, not taking a salary. It's intimidating, and going through that with someone else and having their support, I felt was valuable to me emotionally. And then operationally, as Jack pointed out, I think there's a lot of value in collaborating with someone that kind of has a different approach to things, similar background, but I think, as Jack highlighted, our mentalities are a little bit different towards people management, M&A strategies, things that matter when doing a deal. We have a difference of opinion, and I think it's important to have those debates to get to an answer that's ultimately the right one.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lonely journey as any form of being a founder, which I consider people who buy into a franchise as, they are a founder of a company that operates franchises. So you guys having each other definitely makes the journey more bearable at times during the hard times. So, moving on though to the investment decision, can you walk us through, the summarized version of your process? I'm going to imagine, you guys kind of alluded to it, that you took a pretty wide stance and wide view of franchising. So you probably said no to a lot of concepts before you got to Meineke. So yeah, what was did you have like a checklist or a buy box that you were looking for, and Meineke was the one that hit that? Or, how did this process go for you guys?
It happened over well over a year. We took our time, did a ton of research. At one point, we downloaded every franchise that the SBA would loan on, just as a way to broaden the universe of concepts. I think we really wanted to be in a franchise, as Jake alluded to. He had a ton of experience in franchising. I didn't, but I like the idea of, paying a royalty for product market fit and having execution risk. I think we've been really comfortable with that as opposed to some of the other risks that you might have outside of a franchise. I have a lot of family in automotive, not so much in repair, but in other aspects of the industry. And so we ultimately got excited about auto services, kind of broadly defined. It combined Jake's experience in franchising, some experiences I had in auto. And then we spent a lot of time segmenting the different levels or layers of auto services. We liked Quick Lube, but wasn't sure that it would be positioned well for an ultimate exit. We spent a lot of time in car wash, really well penetrated, a lot of smart money. We felt similarly about collision. And so we ultimately settled on repair first as a category. We looked at a bunch of different brands within repair. Ultimately felt like Meineke, A, was a great brand, had been around since the 70s. Folks have a lot of recognition of the concept. And it was also really fragmented. We're more comfortable doing acquisitions than developing new sites. And given the composition of the franchise base a couple of years ago, and Patrick, it's changed quite a bit in the last few years, we thought it would be a really nice concept to execute on a roll-up. And I think it has been.
Yeah. Just to add on what Jack said, I think we wanted the ability to move quickly, which is the main reason why we gravitated to franchising. We wanted to execute on a roll-up strategy. There's a lot of benefits to the closed-loop network within franchise systems. We have access to all the other owners, their sales, car count, ticket size, contact information, geography. So we wanted the ability to move fast, build a track record, and we thought that this framework allowed us to do that. And as Jack pointed out, the top 5 franchisees accounted for maybe 10% of the locations at the time, which meant that, we would have a competitive edge in the M&A arena, which kind of steered us away from some of the other brands that we were looking at that had large established franchisee groups. And then the fundamentals were good, strong unit economics. So there were really no downsides to the Meineke brand, at least at the time that we identified.
Okay. And so that first deal, how did you guys discover it? And can you walk us through, whatever you're comfortable sharing? Did you end up going the SBA route? Did you self-finance, seller finance?
Yeah, sure. So we said to Meineke, we want to be Meineke corporate. We want to be Meineke franchisees. Here are markets that we think are compelling. And those were secondary and tertiary markets in the Southeast that were growing a ton. Asheville, North Carolina was one of them. And we said, when you have a resale of 3 units or more, we're going to buy those. And you've got our word that we will get this deal done. We had raised a small friends and family round at that point. We had a small amount of committed capital to get us to what we thought was about 10 locations. It ended up being enough for 25, but we could talk about how we bridged that gap. So at one point, and we were building out a pipeline in the Carolinas while we were waiting for a resale. We kind of pursued it across a couple of different avenues. We got a call. There were 3 stores that an owner was looking to sell as he and his wife were ready for retirement. All in Asheville, North Carolina. The stores are within 15 minutes of each other, so operationally, it was a really great way to get our feet wet. As we were working on getting that deal done, and we paid cash for it, there was no financing, it wasn't seller financed, it was truly just using some of the equity that we had raised. We built out a pipeline. I think we had 7 stores in our pipeline when we closed on the 3 in Asheville. 2 more were in North Carolina, 5 were in Wisconsin. And we can talk about why we entered a new market, but it was one of the best things I think we did for our business. And so there was definitely some risk of, are we going to only own 3 Meinekes, and is that enough for everybody? Our COO, who's a huge part of the secret sauce of why operationally the business has worked well, can we keep Joe happy with 3 stores? The answer is no. And so there was a lot of pressure to grow relatively quickly in a way that was sustainable, and in a way that we were adding the right locations. But Patrick, to answer your question, it was 3 in Asheville from the beginning.
Yeah, and can you maybe walk us through just like what are the typical unit economics of a Meineke, just so we kind of level set on what you were working with those initial 3 locations?
Yeah, so the standard unit economics for a Meineke location, $1 million top line, about 20% store level EBITDA margins. And these 3 were maybe performing a little bit below that mark. And our portfolio has been performing above that mark. But
both
those are
scales and margin, right, Jake?
Yes.
What was that?
I was going to say our system with our business is Velocity Automotive, and Velocity AUV and margin is like 10 to 20% above the Meineke system wide. And we've got 3 or 4 points of store level margin in excess of the system.
Wow. Okay. So we're talking the roughly 200 to 250K net margins here, which is way more than I would have thought for these businesses. I don't know why. I always thought they were smaller boxes and just, relatively smaller numbers. But okay, that's pretty impressive. I mean, given this, I know it's an unsexy brand, but were you guys competing for that deal with a bunch of other people? There's a lot of brands, especially in the QSR space. I mean, a lot of people want to be on that list of when a resale hits the market, I want the deal. I mean, it's like good luck. There's probably multiple groups with 100 plus locations that are going to be ahead of you if you're new to the franchise game. So yeah, how competitive was that first deal?
It was not a competitive situation.
Okay.
We've invested really heavily in relationships. We're in 3 markets today: Carolinas, Wisconsin, and Southern New England. We go to all of the events. We love going to Meineke conventions and conferences and meeting the other dealers. We've learned a ton from the different folks we've interacted with, and we've also tried to frankly earn respect and trust of the people that are our fellow franchisees today. Maybe they're looking to retire in the future. We've been fortunate. We were Rookie Franchisee of the Year last year, or our first year in the system. We were multi-unit franchisee, and Joe, our operator, was Operator of the Year this past year. So I think we've tried to be, credible and trustworthy, and we don't retrade. We're really honest about what we can do and what we can't. And I think that has slowly, in our markets, allowed us to get phone calls when people are ready to transition into their next chapter.
I would also say the other piece is owners looking to exit, some more than others, but generally they all care about their employees' well-being. So we've done a good job, I think, giving everyone a fair shot. We have 100% retention post-acquisition. Not everyone makes it long-term. Some people are more reluctant to buy in a process and changes, but those that embrace it and demonstrate the ability to absorb new concepts, there's a place on the team for them. And I think that sellers really value that mentality.
When you say you don't retrade, you just mean you guys don't, maybe change the deal terms you're looking for mid-conversation, or can you expand further on that?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and we've got the benefit, that's the right thing to do, full stop, right? This is many of our counterparties, this is their largest or one of a small handful of largest financial transactions they will do, and we take that really seriously. We are formerly private equity guys, but we're wearing t-shirts today. We're not suit and ties sitting in an office building somewhere. So we try to be really gracious with that. And then, we're a couple years into it. We've got the foresight of, I don't know how many Meineke P&Ls we've looked at, but probably close to 100. There's a couple of variables that really matter to us when we're looking at new centers, but many of the drivers of sales and profitability will change under our ownership, which is to say there's a small amount of information that we need to determine if we can make a bid or pay a price that is what a seller is looking for. And if it works for them, great. If it works for us, great. And if not, let's stay in touch because things are always changing. But because our proverbial box is relatively narrow in terms of what we're looking to own, I think that's enabled us to know up front, here's what we're comfortable doing, or here's what we're not comfortable doing.
Which is to say that we're not going to drag people through lengthy diligence processes only to arrive at a number that they're not going to be comfortable selling at. So we can have that conversation very quickly without, stretching them thin on time and taking them through the mud just to get to a conclusion that we could have arrived at a lot sooner.
And given you guys are at 24 locations today, but I think you said you've seen probably over 100 P&Ls within the system. Is there any common deal killer? Like, what are those benchmarks or key statistics that you're looking for to know if this is a green light or this is not going to be something that you guys can pursue?
I'll tell you my 2 biggest ones, and Jake, you may have different ones. Low car count is tough. Sales are a component of how many cars you fix per week times your ticket size. With proper software, proper process, it's much easier to grow ticket size than car count. So if we see a shop doing 25 cars, 30 cars a week, it's going to be challenging. Our team has done it, but it's a lot of time. It's a lot of expenditure on marketing. It's hard to do, and it's slower. So we spend a lot of time thinking about car count, looking at car count. We're up as a portfolio in car count this year. That is a little atypical in the space as cars are newer, right? They're coming to visit your shop less frequently. They're coming for bigger issues, right? So folks are making up sales that way, but it requires a lot of marketing and a lot of process to grow your car count. And then the second thing, we are maniacally focused on rent. for a location where we don't own the real estate. I think one of the biggest things we've seen people get sideways or over their skis on is paying too much in rent. And so as a portfolio, I think we're like 5.6% of sales is what we pay for rent. And we're growing. That's on a historical basis, so that number will come down over time. We're not going to change rent. We're often getting leases assigned to us, right, as part of these transactions. And so car count and rent issues are the two biggest deal killers for me. But Jake, you might have some others worth mentioning too.
Yeah, the other obvious one is just geography. I think when we started out, we were pretty much entertaining any deal. We'll still look at deals outside of our core geographies, but at this stage, we're concentrated in 3 distinct markets, the Carolinas, Wisconsin, in Greater Boston. Any shops outside of those markets, we'll take a look at. If they're really strong performers, maybe we'd make an exception, but I think there's value in being geographically concentrated. We'd ideally like to continue growing our platform around those core markets so that we don't have to layer in additional members on our corporate team. And I think our corporate staff now is leveraged enough to kind of grow 10, 15 locations in our existing markets without having to hire anyone new. Whereas if we were to enter a new market, we'd have to hire someone new, and it's hard to justify a regional manager overseeing 1 to 2 locations.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of start at the beginning for that org structure, because you guys moved, right, temporarily for that first 3-unit deal, and Joe came with you, I believe. So probably be helpful just set the stage on who is Joe, how'd you find him, and how critical was he into, let's say, those first 3 units, because it seems like that was an impetus for expanding more because you wanted to keep him happy.
Joe's an incredibly special guy. We love working with him. We love spending time with him as well. He's a really loud Italian guy from the Bronx. He's a ton of fun, but I say that's his background because he's a great battlefield general. He leads our people in a way that builds them up, and he's able to speak to our store level team, our corporate team, our lenders and investors on occasion as well. His gift is dealing with people, and I think that has enabled us to avoid some of the challenges that a lot of folks in these type of businesses deal with. Joe's a master mechanic. He has forgotten more about cars than I will ever know, and a lot of our mechanics will ever know. He's worked in dealerships. He's worked in independent shops. He was in management at Mavis at one point as well. He's early 30s. He's hard charging, full of energy. We happened to meet him through my doctor. It's kind of a funny story. I was going for a COVID shot, and my doctor was like, "What are you up to?" And I told her Jake and I were about to buy a couple of Meinekes, and she said, "Well, you've got to meet my nephew." Jake and I had been looking for an operator of sorts, a COO type, and we hadn't found someone who was high energy and as hungry as we wanted to find. We really wanted to be rowing together with somebody. I was a little hesitant that Dr. Jones's nephew was the person, but a week later, I got on the phone with him. I think we spent 3 hours, and I texted Jake, "This is our guy." The next day, Jake and I were heading down to the Carolinas to tour some shops. Joe flew down. We didn't even, in retrospect, it was really rude of us. We didn't even really tell him the itinerary or what we were up to. He just came, and that was really just a sign of things to come. The 3 of us have been doing this every single day since. It's been a blast, but I would say the lesson here is there's a ton of people that are, industry experts, whether that's QSR or auto or whatever concept. Joe is an industry expert, but even more, it's the way he relates to people and communicates messages. That's what's made this continue to work so that we can keep adding stores.
Yeah. And I'll say having him on the road with us to diligence acquisition opportunities was a great way to get to know him, and is ultimately how we got comfortable with the relationship. And that's something, I think that's a process that we'll take into our next platform and any platform thereafter.
Can you kind of share what his core role is? Is he the one training all the mechanics or making sure that there's, quality control as far as just doing the best practices for the labor force?
So his role has evolved as our portfolio has grown. When we owned 3 stores in North Carolina, he was the district manager, if you will, for that set of stores. He's got a huge level of competency, but that was the job at that point. Today, we've got about 10 folks on our corporate team. So Joe's our COO. There's a gentleman named Alex, who's his number two and our director of operations. He also has a lot of multi-unit repair experience, both inside and outside of Meineke. He ran another franchisee within the brand, and so he's got a lot of brand-specific experience. Those two guys, are in and around all three of our markets. And then in each market, we've got a couple of regional managers or district managers. Those folks are assigned 4 to 6 locations. Depends on the market, depends on kind of the distance between stores or the resource need. And their job is to be in stores every day, to be implementing the training, to be making sure that these Meinekes are best in class. That is what the regional operations folks do. Joe and Alex are traveling around, they're implementing process, but they're a little bit more focused on, strategic level things. Should we be using different software? Should we be tweaking our marketing strategy? We spent a lot of time the last year growing our fleet sales business. Servicing fleet is an awesome thing for repair shops to do. It's not always the most profitable work, but it keeps your garages busy. And from our perspective, it creates like the opposite of empty restaurant syndrome. Busier garages get busier. And I'd say those two guys have done an amazing job kind of building out a strategy for fleet sales, but also putting it into practice and actually executing on it. So Joe will sometimes work on cars, in part just because he loves it, but there's so much that he has to offer. We try to keep him out of that as much as we can.
Yeah, and I would also say he's become more involved on M&A diligence. I would say at the start, Jack and I owned that work stream, and to a degree we still do, but he's been an integral part of looking at deals, conducting walkthroughs. He just has a different lens from which he sees a shop and a shop operations. From being in automotive his whole life, he's able to identify things that Jack and I can't. In fact, like we had a deal that didn't reach the finish line recently. It still may close, but we did our final walkthrough and he identified, 3 or 4 pieces of equipment that were broken or needed to be repaired, and the magnitude of the repairs is meaningful. And Jack and I just don't have that same viewpoint. So he's been really helpful on new deals and new deal diligence.
Was the plan always to move into the market for wherever your first acquisition was going to be? Did you take a page out of the Garnett Station playbook by doing that? Or what was the thought there? Because there are folks who, maybe they'll visit a good amount if they do an acquisition outside of where they live. But I'd still say it's pretty atypical to literally uproot yourself and just live in market.
Yeah, and we were really fortunate. We were at stages of our lives where we were able to do that. I think we both thought it was critical. And in fact, the only way to have a chance of this being successful was to be there every day. I'm so glad we did it. I don't want to speak for Jake, but I think he is too. We got to know our employees. Many of them are still with us from that initial chapter. We learned a lot about the business. We're certainly not, mechanics or automotive people, but I think we now know a lot more of the right questions to ask. And we have the utmost respect for folks in our shops and what they do because we've seen it. So I think you have to. This is not a passive investment by any stretch. There's a lot of blocking and tackling in auto repair, probably in a lot of different businesses, but there's a lot of personalities in this space. And I think when people know who they're working with, and it's not a couple of guys in New York City, but it's folks who are living in North Carolina, I think that's really important. So we were in Asheville for 6 months. We then bought a 5-pack of stores in Wisconsin, and the 3 of us moved to Madison for probably 3 months, and ultimately kind of resumed living again in New York. But it was incredibly helpful to have extended periods of time where you're in store developing relationships with people.
Yeah, I was going to say, we weren't going to garner the respect of our employees based on our knowledge of automotive. Everyone is well aware that that is not our background. So it was important for me and Jack to connect with them on a personal level, convey that we cared about them. No one wants to work for people that don't treat them the right way. So sending that message from day one was really important. Ultimately, Joe is going to be the tough guy, the guy that makes tough decisions, gets on our employees when they're underperforming. Jack and I really just want to be there to connect with the employees and motivate them to work for an owner that cares about them. And I think we achieved that objective in Asheville and then later on when we moved to Madison.
Was there any key hires that you guys had to make in jumping to Madison? As you go from 3 units to 8 units, what was the, I guess, corporate overhead strategy there to make sure that what you just did in North Carolina didn't start trending the opposite direction while then also taking on 5 entire new stores?
So we were at 5 when we made the
Okay.
jump to Wisconsin. We had added 2 singles in North Carolina. We had a regional manager covering those 5 at that point in time alongside Joe. The 3 of us moved to Madison. And the Madison acquisition, it was 5 stores. It's the biggest by store count acquisition we've done. We've mostly bought 1 garage at a time for a bunch of different reasons. But this was a unique opportunity. They are incredibly strong Meinekes. The prior owner was a husband-wife duo. They're great people. They just ran a best-in-class operation. I think today Madison is the second best DMA for Meineke, and number 1 has like twice the number of stores, which is to say this was the type of acquisition that we were so excited about. You just figure out how to make it work. And importantly, there's an incredible regional manager running these stores alongside the husband-wife owners. He's still with us today, call it 2.5 years later. And having him, we thought he was really competent and a terrific human. Both things have been completely true. He's been a huge asset. We've grown that market from 5 to 9 stores. He's been a huge part of the success. And so knowing that there was a person there alongside the regional manager we had in North Carolina gave us more confidence that we could do this successfully. But in many ways, going 700 or 800 miles away was the biggest risk we took. Doubled our rooftop. It probably tripled our EBITDA at the time. And I'm really glad we did it, but it was a spooky couple of weeks in the beginning to try and get it all done.
So, how did you guys get from 10 to 24? Is it really just rinse and repeating of these, networking with franchisees, being at the top of the list for the deals? Because, again, I see it from what we do with franchise brokerage and even sell side M&A or whatever. We get a lot of private equity people who want to do what you guys are doing. And I don't know, maybe they're focusing on the wrong space, but yeah, is there any element of luck here or just go? Because again, just going from 0 to 24 in a couple of years, winning rookie franchise owner of the year, then becoming the actual being awarded the top franchisee of the year. From the outside, it couldn't have gone any better. So is there any secret sauce here to that scaling of units, or are you guys only picking the winning locations? Have you ever taken a below average unit? Yeah, what's anything deeper here that we should know?
So you asked about luck. We've been incredibly lucky, right? The reality is we've been incredibly lucky with people. We talked a little bit about Joe. Wouldn't happen without him.
Yeah.
Not even sure we would have wanted to do it without him. Can't state that enough. And he's not the only one, right? There's 10 folks above our store. There's a couple hundred folks in our stores. This doesn't happen without all of them buying into the vision that Jake and I sketched out in our parents' basements a couple years ago. And it's been really rewarding to see people, buy into that and continue buying into it in the same way that we're motivated to go out and do it. So there's a ton of luck. That's true of anything. I think the one thing that maybe we did a little bit differently is we are really comfortable doing really small deals. I think we've done 15 or 16 acquisitions to get to where we are today. We spent a few minutes talking about the 5-unit acquisition in Wisconsin. That's our biggest deal. We've done that. We've bought 2 3-packs, and everything else has been a single unit acquisition. So we targeted markets where there were a ton of single unit acquisitions to do. There's 50-something Meinekes in North Carolina. We own like a dozen. There's a long tail of stores to go out and acquire, even now a couple years into it. But I think in a world where there's a ton of sophisticated capital, everybody's looking for similar things as they get to 5 million of EBITDA or whatever it is. Like, we are very happy buying a garage as long as it makes sense in our markets. And so the job for us is to figure out, where are there enough garages and where there are enough good ones. We want to buy B+ or better stores and make them into A's. We do not want to take dogs and try and make them into A's. I think Joe and our team can do it, but I don't think it's a good use of their time.
And just to expound on that, I mean, people's everything. We've gotten extremely lucky with the people that we've recruited, but mostly inherited, and it's given us the confidence to go out and execute on our M&A strategy. If we're absorbing bad people that aren't getting the job done, maybe that shop doesn't improve immediately. Maybe we have to press pause on our M&A, but we've performed, we're up 21% post-acquisition. So these acquisitions have generally all gone very, very well, which has allowed us to go out and continue to buy shops without having to worry about the performance of our existing portfolio. And I will say Jack hit on this at the beginning of the call, but we've invested a lot of time fostering relationships with franchisees without knowing their intentions. Everyone in our markets knows who we are. We reached out pretty much immediately just to introduce ourselves. No one knew who we are or who we were. So building those relationships, it helps obviously that we were Rookie of the Year, 2024 Multi-Unit Operator of the Year. That certainly helps with our recognition. But before our name got out, we were smiling, dialing, introducing ourselves, and building those relationships. And a lot of those people that we had contacted have eventually raised their hands and said, hey, I think now is the time for an exit. Would you consider looking at my shops? So we've been really scrappy in that way.
And Jake, you bring up something that reminds me too. Patrick, we just show up. I think a lot of people aren't willing to drive to Greenville, South Carolina, or to Appleton, Wisconsin, or wherever it is and say, you know, can we go have a beer with you, or can we buy you a coffee? No, you do a great job in, you know, fleet or financing or whatever it may be. And we have no agenda, and it's really the case we don't. We just want to get to know you and ask you a couple of operational questions. People respond to that. And now a couple years into this, you know, people call Joe all the time asking him for advice on certain topics. I think my view is he's the best operator in Meineke and maybe the best in repair. But I think that exchange of ideas and being willing to show up, people have realized, okay, these guys they're reasonable, they're normal, they're serious with their intents, and they're not going to mislead us. Doing that consistently for what's now 2.5 years has helped with the relationships a ton.
How do you guys spend your time today? Obviously, at various points, especially early on, it sounds like you were basically in the shop or in the shops quite a bit. But yeah, today, I mean, are you guys mainly just trying to drive more M&A, or, you know, are you spending time trying to motivate your team, like the corporate team primarily? Or yeah, what's kind of if you had to break it down, what percentage of your time is going to what activity?
There's several buckets, and Jake's week is different from mine. I think at this point we're focused on different parts of the business. There's strategy and marketing stuff. There was a big Google Ads project I have been working on the last 6 or so weeks. It kind of just came to a resolution last week. We still spend a lot of time on M&A. We like to buy the real estate underlying our businesses where possible. That's something that's really a Jake and Jack work stream as opposed to other members of our team. I feel like we've got a really strong relationship with Meineke, the franchisor, which is to say we invest a lot of time exchanging ideas, flagging potential issues, you know, talking with the other larger franchisees in the brand and figuring out ways where we can all be successful together. That's where I spend my time. Jake is a little bit more in the weeds operationally in certain aspects of our business. So your week's probably a little bit different, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest pieces of our success, I believe, is our incentive-based compensation plan, which has been refined over time, but I've spent a lot of time creating those pay structures for managers and back-of-house employees, the technicians. So I'm constantly collaborating with the regionals on what pay plans to offer, and it's obviously contingent on the existing employees, what they're making. It's our biggest expense line item. So spending a lot of my time there, financial reporting and KPIs weekly and then monthly when we wrap up our P&Ls and balance sheets. And then more recently, I'd say over like the last 6 months to 9 months, what we've learned over time is that operating 3 locations is vastly different than operating 25. You can really muscle your way through things when you only have 3 shops. With 25, you just don't have the bandwidth to focus on the minutia. So having standardized processes that regionals can impart on on shop managers so that you're not really training one shop at a time. So really working with Joe and Alex to formulate those materials has been a big priority over the last, we'll call it 9 months. So yeah, I would say that's where I'm spending most of my time.
Okay. I'm sure it's been just like an absolute whirlwind going, the entire journey from that first acquisition to where you are today. But compared to private equity and yeah, I mean, even just in general, like, is this fun for you guys? Like, are you having fun doing it? Because that's something I think I've come to value more. I think 5 years ago, if I just met someone who's like, oh, I own X number of franchises, it would be like, oh, that's awesome. But then sometimes I realize like sometimes these people just like they're not actually having fun. They may be building value in the portfolio, but like their day to day, like you could tell they're just getting beaten down from whatever it is, operations or dealing with labor challenges, like you name it. It's not an easy game. But yeah, well, I mean, are you guys enjoying the ride or?
Yes, we're having a blast. We work really hard. I'm not sure our hours have changed all that much from prior roles, and there's way more stress, but I love the people I work with. I've got two amazing partners in Jake and Joe. They continue to put up with me, so I think they like me too. And it's been incredibly fun. It has its moments, but Jake and I talk about this all the time. Like, we look at our friends who are similar vintages or in our prior roles, and not a lot of them are happy. And I won't speak for Jake, but I'm incredibly happy, and I think he is too.
Yeah, I would think about the learning experience that we've had doing 15 transactions in pretty much 2 years. That is not something that I was experiencing in private equity. Did a couple transactions. So the deal flow has yielded some really good learning benefits. And then it's been incredibly rewarding on the operational side of things. Having employees approach you, say, this is the best culture I've ever been immersed in, and I've been in the industry for over 20 years. That's really rewarding and fulfilling. They have families, you're helping them provide for their families, you're giving them upward mobility in some cases, promotional opportunities. So the employee management side of things has been one benefit that I didn't really foresee originally that's really made me happy in this experience. And there's obviously some of the ancillary benefits of being your own boss, and Jack's out working in California today. I'm in New York still, and we're really well aware of the work streams and things that need to get done, and I think we've gotten comfortable being able to get it done from anywhere and not getting blindsided by last minute emails late on a Friday that's stemming from a managing director who might not be organized. We know exactly what needs to get done at all times, and we can manage our workload effectively because of that. That's been a nice benefit. And then finally, which is what drove me to this in the first place, is we're working our butts off. Maybe we're investing the same amount of time daily that we were in our private equity roles, but ultimately we're doing it for ourselves, not for a boss that we have to report to. So for me, the investment is worth it because it's really coming back to us at the end of the day.
Well, is there a longer term goal? Because you guys said, right, that you're raising some capital to expand further, but if we just kind of stop where you are today, 25-ish stores, I'm going to guess, just based off the unit economics you guys have shared, your EBITDA is north of $5 million. I mean, again, just based off, you guys raised a friends and family round. I don't know if there's a buyer that could take your entire portfolio in one shot. I don't know if Meineke would even give the green light on that, but I'm going to imagine that you could sell out and have a win for everyone involved, your investors, but you're choosing to go bigger. So yeah, whatever you're willing to share on the longer term vision, I think would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, look, we're continuing to operate. We're continuing to build our pipeline, review new acquisition opportunities. We'd like to keep growing, and there's no concrete timeline, but we will be opportunistic. Ideally, when that time comes, I think we'd like to exit everything under the Meineke umbrella at once. We think it can be an attractive asset for lower middle market private equity, family office, maybe just a franchise investor that's a multi-brand investor that is looking to diversify their franchise holdings. So we think it would be an attractive asset to any one of those buyer pools. But yeah, right now we're just focusing on the day-to-day operations, and we'll be opportunistic about an exit.
So as far as expanding though, are you guys looking to stay within Meineke? multi-brand? How are you guys playing that, or at least going to attempt to play that?
Well, it's hard to tell the future always. We're both 30. We want to be doing this. We joke we want to be doing this for another 49 and a half years. No more, no less. And so I think at some point we'll want to enter another brand. There's more that Jake and I want to do. We love being Meineke Franchises. We've been investors in prior lives. We're some hybrid today. So I think as we think about the future, we will enter another brand. We may explore some non-franchise opportunities, which we're doing at the moment with relative, some things more seriously, some things less seriously. But I'm hopeful, and I know Jake is too, that, a lot of these Meineke learnings can be applied to other leadership intensive businesses. There's a lot of other concepts within franchising and elsewhere that I think require a lot of the same things to be successful as owning Meineke does. And so not sure we know exactly what's next with respect to the next category, but we're looking at a ton of things. We're getting eager to pull the trigger on something. And, I think one of our goals for 26 is to enter the next thing.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited to see what that is, and I'm sure the listeners will too. So this has been a great conversation, guys. Where can people who want to follow along and be on the lookout for what you guys do in tandem with Meineke, where are the best places online to follow you guys?
Yeah, and you'll laugh, Patrick, because your content is really strong. Jake's and mine is terrible and even non-existent. But we both have LinkedIn's. I'm sure you'll post our full names, and it's relatively easy to find us on LinkedIn from that. Our firm is called Edium Capital. Velocity Automotive is our Meineke business. So that's probably the easiest place to find us. Our emails are both first.last@Edium Capital. So jack.foster and jake.mclaughlin.
Beautiful. We'll plug all that in the show notes, folks. I would definitely recommend following along on LinkedIn at a minimum. And yeah, guys, naturally, you guys are too busy building the portfolio to be posting content. So I think you're doing just fine. But yeah.
Well, Jake and I joke we've got a face for radio. Content and TV not so much, but radio's okay.
Sure. All right. Well, look, guys, great to have you on. And yeah, I'm excited to see what you do next. So maybe we'll have you on next year once we know what that second venture is.
We'd love to.
Cool.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Patrick.